AI. What's your thoughts on AI? Do you think that it's coming to take all of our jobs? Is it something that we should be scared of, something we should work with? Where do you sit with that?
I think it's a interesting space, right? Because artificial intelligence, the whole sort of definition behind it is to basically create computers, or in other words, machines that can basically do stuff at the same capacity as a human or possibly better. That is the whole kind of goal, right? I've been exploring artificial intelligence for a number of years, before the hype. And first thing first I was looking at was bias in AI systems. So looking at, for these computers and these machines to be able to achieve a particular function, they are fed with data. And that data, in most cases, is sourced from the internet, or mostly from the internet, should I say. And, sometimes through that filtering or that labeling of the data and being fed into a machine, these machines would operate in what someone could look at it and assess it and kind of call this bias. The conversation of bias in AI is an interesting one, because folks talk about this thing of like, can we unbias the AI? And it's like, but then that stops us from talking about the human condition. If we are training machines based on our humanness or all of the different information and content in the world, human beings are biased. There are harmful biases and there's not so harmful biases. But when you train this into a machine that has no context, doesn't understand anything, an algorithm is a set of instructions that needs to achieve a particular outcome. Once you give it, for example, I looked at policing and how they were using AI systems in the court environment, trying to use an algorithm that could predict who most likely will reoffend or not. AI makes predictions. That's what it does. It tries to examine the past to predict the future. That's one way how I try to describe it a lot. And there was an investigative publication called ProPublica, and they created this article called Machine Bias, where they basically started to investigate this particular software, and they were able to see, okay, cool. For black offenders who are maybe first-time offenders versus, a white offender who's got a seasoned criminal history, the white offender would be seen as least likely to reoffend, where the first-time black offender would be seen as most likely to reoffend.
But why is that?
So that came from what they discovered was that when someone gets arrested, they get fed a particular questionnaire. And in this questionnaire, you have to answer particular questions. This questionnaire is fed into this algorithm. And I guess somehow each question has some sort of weighting to it. So some of the questions was like, how many of your friends have been in prison? Or do you live with your mum and your parents? Do you live, all of these different questions. And then it would weigh this it would make this prediction based on these questions. And probably, I think, maybe possible other data as well. But this is where the flaw comes in, right? It doesn't take into that human context, where it's like, if we were to assess and judge, look at someone, you might argue, and it's hard. I think that's an interesting example. It's hard, right? You might say, okay, this person, because they're a first-time offender, we don't know if they're most likely going to reoffend or not. Or maybe you might argue and say, with this individual who's a seasoned career vet in crime, they might most likely to reoffend. That's hard. That's a particular very hard thing to navigate. But when you also look at it from historically, black people predominantly are the ones who get policed and penalized by the system. You look at some of the things in America, for example, there are folks who they're in prison for years because they can't pay bail, or they've been, there's a lot of studies and statistics and stuff that showcase that. So